these last few days. So, as for the weather, I am a happy camper. But it's Monday morning, and once again, shootings over the weekend. I'm going to keep talking about these incidents of mass murder in America until our government does something about it. And I implore you, I invite you all to join me to exercise our right to want to be safe in our homes. And let me just tell you how bad it's gotten. Over the weekend, there were fireworks somewhere around. North in New Jersey, fireworks by use of by individuals is not really legal. So it's not something we hear often, except maybe Fourth of July or Memorial Day. You know, those odd times that we have. Anyway, fireworks. I kid you not. I was scared to death because for a hot second I thought it was gunfire. I'm going to leave it right there. Mind you, I live in the suburbs, peaceful neighborhood, no crime really, there, I mean, it's America and it's real world and things happen everywhere. But yes, I heard fireworks and I was scared. I really thought for a moment that there was gunfire in my neighborhood. Can we do something about the guns? I'm getting nervous. Yes. And I'm using my platform to talk about it every single time I get a chance until we stop having mass shootings every week. Okay. I'll get off my soapbox and I go back to being nice, the whole woman that does everything happy, light. I want us to stay happy and light. Hence, we need to be safe. This week, here in the world of the whole woman, we are chatting with one of our guests who sat with us through the quarantine, visited with us on Living Life Authentically, and we just wanted to touch bases with some of our friends who chatted with us during the pandemic. When we were all at home, they provided so much valuable information to us during the quarantine here when we started quarantine. And so we have invited a good friend of ours back to chat with us about what's going on now, what is it she's focused on. And boy, is this some interesting and exciting stuff. And yes, very purposeful. So our guest today, ladies and gentlemen, devotes her practice to international family law, and she represents clients both in the US and in Eastern Europe. She's a partner of Divorce and Family Law Group, Lindaberry, McCormick, Easterbrook, and Cooper PC. Help us welcome back to Living Life Authentically, none other than Carolina Denhart.
Hello.
Welcome back.
Oh, it's so great. It's so great to be here. And it feels like when you mentioned the quarantine, I'm like, was that a decade ago? It seems like it was forever ago.
Wow. So much has happened since then.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, Caroline, I'm thinking, have I even seen you in person since the pandemic?
I was actually thinking of the same thing, and I don't think so. I don't think we've seen each other. I think that it's
No.
been, I've picked up my travel to Europe, and we'll talk about, my initiative with the orphans from Ukraine and Poland. But, I think it took a little bit for life to get back to normal. And,
Mhm.
we're both trying to do great things for the community. And I actually look forward to seeing you. I hope we get it done soon.
Let's hope for that. But let's get our viewers caught up. For those who are joining us for the first time, who've not had the pleasure of meeting you, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where were you born? And we're going to do a really quick bio check-in with you, only because we want people to know about the person before we get into your purpose.
So listen, I am the American dream. I was born in Poland. English is my second language. My mother left Poland from a great family. Nothing wrong with our life there. After her own divorce, she couldn't get far away enough. So how about put an ocean between her and her ex-husband, right? My father. So we came here, and boy, life was hard, but it was also beautiful. My mother, a very self-made woman, instilled in me the value of hard work, dedication, and every opportunity that this country had to offer. I graduated college, went to grad school, married an attorney, a politician who became a state senator. Today is the Senate president. Life
Oh,
was grand. Life was grand, living the American dream. Well, just like with everything else, Natalie, some fairy tales come to an ending way too soon. Found myself in a position where I had to get divorced and rewrite my fairy tale. And I did just that. I went to law school, graduated third in my class from New York Law, quickly got to work, developed a practice, became a partner in a Short Hills law firm. But I found a trend women coming into my office had that same deer in the headlight look, not knowing anything about their finances, maybe not being a true partner in their marriages, very lost, not financially prepared,
Mm.
overwhelmed. From there was born the Divorce Dynasty platform, which is a great platform that I run, concierge services, plugging in individuals when someone's going through a life change, death, divorce, or disability, to make them feel whole and supported as they start their next chapter. So my career thus far has really been focused on, yes, you're getting divorced, not the greatest news in the world, but let's focus on your journey and your rebirth.
Wow. Okay, and there we have it in a nutshell. So, as much as we hate to address the topic of divorce, and over at the Whole Woman World, we like to think of the whole person, the whole family, and things being intact, but we know that is not reality. Most people are putting the pieces together, whatever the pieces fell apart from. So, fast forward for me, Carolina. All this went on during the pandemic. You managed to practice throughout the pandemic and help so many people, because one of the things we talked about during the pandemic was the increase in spousal abuse and domestic abuse, and whatever direction it was going, whether it was male on female or female on male. We just found that it was a real tragedy and something you had to figure how to deal with. Then we get back to quote unquote normal, or so we think we're getting back to normal, and war breaks out in
Yeah,
Eastern Europe.
absolutely. You raise an interesting point before we talk about the war in Ukraine and its impact on orphans that are in Poland and across Europe, is that the pandemic really put a strain on a lot of marriages, and people that were two ships passing in the night, that were, catching a train to the city, working, meetings, softball, baseball, all of a sudden they're stuck in the house and they were forced by the sheer nature of the pandemic to deal with their failing relationships. And what ended up happening even more so was that not only do they find that they have nothing in common, but the children had the front row seat to see the marriages falling apart.
Mm,
So we have a lot of fallout of children now having issues psychologically, parents' divorce being up, and everybody feeling a little bit lost because of what happened. The other interesting point, I just did a talk on this last week, was something called gray divorces. People getting divorced after the age of 60. And what makes this more complicated is you spent your life together. Here you're going to retire. You have a nice nest egg that you're going to now take together to go wherever. And all of a sudden, that nest egg has to pay for two households.
two
Well, how do
houses.
we do that? So the pandemic in itself caused a lot of changes in the matrimonial practice by identifying issues and really seeing an increase in divorce. But the highlight, as you mentioned, if there could be a highlight in the word of war, is that a lot of people realize that their life may not be complete without children. And for marriages that maybe were childless, or people felt that they waited too long, or they're never going to have kids, it raised an issue for a lot of women, especially watching those children walk for kilometers on TV as the war broke out in Ukraine, over the border into the safety of Poland. And my phone started ringing, questions being asked of, what can we do? We want to bring these kids here. We want to adopt.
Mm.
And that's where the shift in my family law practice took on a new momentum. So let's maybe get into that, right?
So, you, the divorce attorney, started receiving phone calls from intact marriages or women with the means to want to solve the problem that was arising out of this tragic situation where Russia declares war on Poland. And yes, we all saw this, where children were.
War on Ukraine.
I'm sorry. Oh God, not Poland. God forbid. Oy. The world is upside down. I stand corrected. And so yes, another crisis is birthed
Yeah,
on the
another crisis
heels.
is birth. Yeah. And so, because I'm familiar with the very difficult and stringent requirements to adopt a child from Eastern Europe, making it virtually impossible. By way of example, you have to be 40 or under, married for 7 years, heterosexual, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So most people under
40 or
40,
under,
yeah. So,
married
you
for
know,
70 years.
So I
Most
said to myself,
people wait till they're
even
35 to get married.
yeah, even before the war, I said to myself, who is under 40, married for 7 years, that's not starting their own family, that's trying to save like this makes no sense. So they made it virtually impossible. Poland is next on my hit list because they make it virtually impossible as well. But when the war broke out, notwithstanding the criteria, this is an emergency response to a war zone. So when the children were being evacuated from orphanages in Ukraine, and it's important to note that these children were orphanages before the war. They're not orphans because they lost their parents in the war. They were already residing in orphanages,
Mm.
orphans of the country prior to war. So we contacted, the embassy and started working with Eastern Europe in general and said, "Listen, guys, America's open. We have many, many vetted families waiting for children. Let's bring them here." Well, that's where we met the pushback, and we still have not been successful in lifting the moratorium to allow these adoptions to go through. But we do have a light at the end of the tunnel in that the power of the family, Natalie, which is always what you talk about. There were families, 300 of them, scattered throughout the US, that were already matched with these children in Ukraine before the war. Already matched. So some of them were, two steps away, some of them are one step, but already matched. They got together, they formed a community, they reached out to their legislatures, and they've identified themselves now as a group. There's 300 children identified, and we are trying to push for President Zelensky to allow those 300 children at a minimum to come outside the moratorium and to be brought here to start their American dream with these families. There's no reason to keep these kids there.
So, as an immigrant myself, I am only too familiar with how complicated the process of adoption, then migration can be. And if you're fortunate enough to have an attorney such as yourself who understands to work it almost from the immigration, then adoption way, where you get your US clearance first, you're working with three different sets of laws here: American law, the Polish law, and the Ukrainian law. And I stand with the Ukrainian people in protecting their children, in yes, not just allowing anyone to pluck them off, because we understand that they're being stolen off the streets in Ukraine and being taken to other countries. They'll remain nameless. Use your imagination. You know who they are. And then they're being indoctrinating and God knows what, and becoming child soldiers or whatever else is happening to them. We don't have enough evidence to speak definitively. But Poland already had very strict adoption laws also.
Yes, yes. I mean, look, the process itself is that there are international requirements that govern international adoption. So there's an agency in Ukraine that is vetted, that works with the given country, in this instance, the United States, that has our adoption agencies. Those two talk, have certain criteria and processes, then plug in the embassies in both countries, then immigration, and ultimately the children come here. This is not a process where we need to recreate the wheel. The standards might be at issue, but the process is very clear and laid out. So it's not as if Ukraine doesn't have the right people to talk to the right people in the US. We have that. The issue is that we need to have, of course, vetted families that go through the process. Children need to be true orphans. We want to make sure that there's no family ties left in the country of origin. And then you follow through with the process, the psychological well-being, the financial well-being. They come here for, a test period, if you will. There has to be a match. So there's all these beautiful steps in place for this to happen. And while we agree that President Zelensky may have instituted this moratorium when the war broke out, of course, there were people at the border stealing kids. Of course, there's got to be a moratorium under martial law. But Natalie, a year and a month later, it doesn't make sense anymore, especially when these children are now living in orphanages, 5 to 7,000 in Poland, as far as we're told, and throughout Western Europe. And we have solutions. It's no longer a threat that at the border these kids are being stolen. We now have orphanages in Poland that will work with their counterparts in the United States. And now, essentially, it's a vetted process.
How involved is the US government with the process of that you were talking about, getting some changes done?
So the United States government is could not be more open to to support this by giving these children the gift of the American dream. We are very supportive of bringing children over. We certainly have our own requirements locally, even foster parenting and so on, to make sure that the children don't fall into ill harm or in the right hands. But we are literally at a standstill because we can't do anything until the president of Ukraine, President Zelensky, lifts the moratorium or at least gives us some asylum on the 300 children that were already paired so we could then implement our processes to start facilitating bringing these kids over here. There is nothing more that we can do. And quite frankly, Poland has taken the position that they will keep these kids safe in Poland for as long as it takes, albeit it's a financial burden to the country because we had to absorb all these orphans in addition to having our own orphans in Poland. But again, Poland can't do anything. The US can't do anything. Ukraine has to be open to the conversation, lifting the moratorium, and then working with us collaboratively.
I wondered about that, how much of a financial burden this has created for the Polish government, because yes, there are 5,000 orphan children, but then you've also absorbed hundreds, if not thousands, of families into Poland as refugees.
You're 100% correct. There's millions of refugees in Poland. I have been there. I think I'm leaving on Thursday. This will probably be my fifth trip since the war. So it's impacting schooling, the infrastructure, housing, all of it, medical supply, everything is being impacted. And the government's working with that. With regard to the children, there were a lot of NGOs, non-government organizations that stepped in globally to provide immediate relief, clothing, formula, Band-Aids, you name it. But unfortunately, a lot of the NGOs pulled out. It's unreasonable to expect these NGOs to stay in long term. They are emergency response. So now, for example, there's an orphanage outside of Warsaw that I visited on 2 occasions, going back there next week, where they had a surplus of you name it. Every snack and food. We had to send food from the US on an emergent basis because the NGO pulled out, and the food that the government provides, yeah, it's basic. But how do you now have these kids go from they had, 3 portions of a snack to none?
Oh, yeah.
So they're definitely feeling it because the money could just is spread so thin.
Wow. Now, how are you managing your coordinating your work with them? Are you traveling as an individual or are you part of a larger organization?
So I have tremendous contacts in Poland through the work that I've done over the last decade in my matrimonial group. In my matrimonial practice. I also am involved in the philanthropic and civic relationships between the U.S. and Poland. So I had my contacts there. What I did on this side of the pond is I put together a mission, a team of people comprised of retired Senator Lesniak, other politicians, religious leaders, civic leaders, and simply business people. And I brought them to Poland at the end of October of last year to visit the orphanages, see firsthand what's going on, and to start the conversation about what are we going to do diplomatically and politically to lift the moratorium, but then what can we do on the humanitarian side by providing the children not only their immediate needs, which are medical and food, but also education. So we organized to donate over 750 iPads that had Duolingo downloaded so they could be taught in the Ukrainian language. We organized to raise money for an operation for a little boy that would never walk, and building that network, because these really are the forgotten children. And even while they were still in orphanages in Ukraine, Natalie, sadly, the Ukrainian social service system, I don't mean to be rude, but it's one of the worst in the world. So these kids were getting bare bones before. This is our opportunity to help. And while some say Carolina, there's orphans all around the world, I agree. But my forte, my first language, my roots are in Poland. So I can help in Poland. I can't really help much in other parts of the world. So I just want to focus on the fact that I understand this is a much bigger issue, but we could only do where we are blessed to give.
And at this point, tell me a little bit about how you are seeking support and assistance from those outside of the network you've already collected. How can those who are inclined to help
Yeah, I mean, and
learn
that's
more?
such a great question. That really is the biggest issue here right now is that as we visit these children, I've met about 1,000 of them. There's 4 to 6,000 more to visit. We identify needs of what they need. There's children that are blind that have never had any braille. They literally lay there and they have a non-existent life. So between educational supplies, humanitarian relief, raising money so that supplies can be bought in Poland because the export is so expensive that it makes more sense for us to work with the vetted agencies we've connected with in Poland for them to go out and take advantage of the dollar being 4.29 of Polish money right now. And you could buy so much, whether formula, diapers, whatever it may be. So I am looking for people that are interested in this conversation and that could help either raise funds or go and give a helping hand or spread the message on what we can do to provide a quality of life for these children while we deal with the adoption moratorium.
What progress are you seeing now, or do you think you're making progress? Is the Ukrainian government paying attention, listening, participating in these conversations?
Yes, I'm happy to report that they absolutely are. That they are very open to doing what's best, but they're in a very difficult place. Their country every single day is still under attack. So it took us a little bit to get to the right people that could focus on the issue of these orphans while there's such a bigger issue going on, right? They're losing power. Hospitals are being attacked. I mean, this is just
They're
a
under
war.
attack.
It's a war zone, right? So I believe we're going to be successful in being able to convince the Ukrainian government to, at a minimum and as a first step, allow those children that were already paired to come to the United States. Because I believe we're going to be able to convince them that there's no fear of them being sold somewhere or being abducted. They passed the smell test on the Ukrainian side before the war. And I believe that once we have the first children hit American soil, whether it be an airport in Texas or Newark, New Jersey, or California, we're going to show that we are united with them. We will protect their children. We will, allow for all sorts of checks and balances and have a collaboration in how to formalize the adoptions. But at a minimum, let's bring the children to safety. And I feel like once that happens, the larger conversation will be easier with that first child coming to America.
I'm curious, Carolina, are these families, these 300 families that were vetted and, all set to get their babies added to their homes and their arms, are these of Ukrainian descent? Are they Eastern Europeans, or they're just Americans who wanted babies and didn't care where the babies were coming from?
So Natalie, what's so beautiful about this story is that it's people from every race, every family, every ethnic background. The individual that brought this to my attention is as American as the Mayflower, and he's a man from God. He already adopted 2 children from Ukraine, and he, like many of the families, are adopting the older children. They usually are not children that most people want. They want the babies, as you said, right? So he's adopting, I believe it's a 14-year-old and a 16-year-old. And the only reason the 16-year-old is in the mix, because she's very close to being, now set
Yeah.
free and aging out of the system, is because her sister's younger. So these people are just these beautiful, giving, kind souls from across the entire fabric of this country. 2 families are from New Jersey that are taking children with all sorts of issues of all ages, of medical concern, and simply wanting to open up their homes.
Wow. Well, tell us how we can stay in touch with you. Tell us how we can get more information, and tell us how they can support your efforts, whether it's financially, in person, with maybe some other legal expertise that they could offer. How can they connect with you? How can they learn more?
The best thing to do, which has been working so beautifully, is for someone to simply, Google me. I am that one crazy person that advertises with her cell phone. So, 973-309-4473. It's everywhere. I get WhatsApp messages, messenger messages, you name it, I get it. I will respond, and I take the time, Natalie, whether it's Saturday at 7 a.m. or no matter what time. I answer every call, I answer the questions, and then I pair people up with what they're looking to do. So, for example, I have individuals that call and say, you're working with the Help Foundation in Poland. We'd love to work directly with them. I connect them with the CEO, who's my good friend now, Arthur Gorniewski, and I connect them that way. Somebody that wants to do a presentation on the topic at their church or their synagogue or their community center, I organize that and bring the right people. So every little bit helps, and every person is so unique. We screen them and then we connect them appropriately.
Well, you have taken on what I know is a huge lift. This is tangentum. I am anxious to hear how this all turns out. Please keep us abreast, and I'm praying that these families are able to bring these children home. And I pray for a miracle every day that one day, just as strangely as Mr. Putin decided to attack Ukraine, that he'll just wake up and decide that he's tired of it and pull out and leave these people alone. I am concerned that this will continue to destabilize the rest of the world.
Natalie, absolutely. That is a concern shared by most logically thinking individuals. But the bigger issue is, let's just say that you get your dream and he pulls out tomorrow. The country's destroyed. It's rubble, right? So these children have nowhere to go back to, even if they were to go back. And quite frankly, they shouldn't be going back to orphanages that were subpar, where they were not getting any education, they were not getting the medical help that they need. When you have an entire country, the United States of America, that's supporting Ukraine in the war and now wants to open up their homes through our beautiful family and community in this country. So this is a conversation that even if the war ends, Natalie, it's not going to stop. We're not going to stop our advocacy for the kids.
And I agree. This is only the beginning, because these children will be displaced for a very long time, and the country it'll be 15, 20 years it takes to repair a country post-war. And that's if the resources are available. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking with Carolina Denhart, and she has devoted her practice to international family law, representing clients both in the United States and Eastern Europe. And as you can tell today, she is passionately committed to helping the orphans of Ukraine that are displaced and currently in Poland. We wish you the best of luck, Carolina. Safe travels. And remember, you can get a hold of Carolina via phone. Text her, WhatsApp her, snail mail her, whatever it is. She will respond. 973-309-4473. And Carolina, if only they knew you were all of 5 feet tall, but you pack a punch. I would never want to be your opponent on the other side of the court.
I want to keep fighting the good fight. Natalie, thank you so much for all that you do and for giving these children a voice through your program. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, and congratulations. I hear you're up for another award and you're once again being acknowledged. Keep doing what you're doing, because you're working for those who have no voice. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, you have been watching The Whole Woman's Living Life Authentically, and I'm Natalie B. McKenzie. And remember, we told you a few weeks ago that our upcoming retreat is scheduled. It's spring summer retreat. It's going to be nice and warm. We're heading out to Cape May, and the dates are June 24th through the 26th. Much more information to follow. Feel free to follow us on Instagram at The Whole Woman, Facebook, The Whole Woman, and of course, you can always find us at twww.thewholewoman.com. Now, remember, our Lady Mist collection is always available to you. And you can shop us online, or you can simply scan the barcode on the screen. Remember, 15% of all proceeds are donated to Fighting Atrocities Against Women Worldwide, where those proceeds are then given to organizations that support women and children in need of access to quality healthcare and education. I'm Natalie B. McKenzie, and I wish you enough life to live